Okay, so now we're going to add some gauges onto our UI to tell us which zones are actively sprinkling and how much sprinkling they have left. So we're going to start at our zone control tab and get to some empty space here. And we're going to drag a gauge node. And we're going to say zone controls. Size 2 by 2. Type is level. Units as a percentage, kind of percent sprinkling remaining from 0 to 100. And this is for zone 1, so zone 1 progress. And let's take a switch node. And configure this, call it update zone gauges. From property, our global variable, current zone, and say if this zone or if this variable equals zone 1, then we're going to send it along to the zone 1 gauge. We'll do that by connecting these. And now we're going to repeat this for the additional zones. So for zone 2, let's change the name here. And add a rule. Say if this equals zone 2, and pass it along to the other zone. And so now we want to determine what we're calling the tick value for the gauges, meaning in my gauge, let's see if this shows up. So in our gauge, we want to determine how much to decrease this amount per second. That's what we call the tick value. So we go to Q tab, and we're going to drag in a function node. Call this reset 1 tick value. And we're going to copy in a little bit of code. Basically says figure out what the fill value of a gauge is, convert it into a percentage, and determine what 1 tick value is. Let's go to the appearance and indicate this a little better. So our input is duration as a timeout variable, and the output is the value of 1 tick on the gauge. Click done. And this actually belongs right here. So remember, this is if a sprinkler is started, a zone is started, as opposed to off. The first thing we're doing is determining that tick value. So now let's take a change node, drag that in. We're going to call this reset zone gauge. And we're going to create 3 rules here. The first one is take message name and set it, or set global current zone based on that passed in value. addition rule, number 100, set that to current value. Set current value and pass it along in the payload. And now we're going to connect the output of this reset zone gauge, move this up, to the input of our update zone gauges. You'll see what that's doing in a second. So we'll save it, link out. And we're going to call this send zone gauge state. Say accept zone gauge state. Bring this in. Deploy our changes. And now let's see if we can visualize what we just did. So if we have our zones and we turn those on, well, actually we'll turn this one off, and we set our durations. It won't matter that much actually. Let's actually put these down a little bit and say start sprinkler. Okay, so I actually went back and did a little bit of debugging because I found that my zone gauges were not filling. And I found a typo here. This was set to message current value. So I have to set to flow current value, deploy my changes, then the gauges started working for me. So we turn it on, gauge fills. After a certain amount of time and delay, the next gauge should fill. And they're not ticking down yet because we're going to do that in the next step.